everyone, and welcome to today's episode. We're going to be talking about Kate Landry Has a Plan by Rebekah Millet. So, this one is a contemporary romance and it's a Southern romance. It's also Christian fiction and it's part of a series. And I'm going to have fun with this series name because pronouncing it is quite tricky, I think, anyway. So, it's Bagnets or beignet for two. So take your pick on which pronunciation you'd like to use. And it's set in New Orleans. So it's got the French Cajun connection there. So why did I want to read this one? Well, I read the first book in the series, Julia Monroe Begins Again, and that was a fabulous story. And we met Kate in that one because Kate and Julia are best friends. So when Kate's story came along, I thought, yes, I definitely want to read that. And I'll add my usual disclaimer and say thank you to the publisher and also Just Read Tours for providing an advanced reader copy. And as always, all the opinions that I express in this episode are completely my own. And I'll add a link to the books that I've mentioned in the show notes. So let's talk about the book. Kate Landry Has a Plan is set in Louisiana in New Orleans. So in this one, we have a number of romance tropes. We have the single parent one where we have an aunt who is the guardian of her 13-year-old niece. We have second chances and childhood sweethearts reuniting as well. And it's also a midlife romance because both of the main characters in this one are 40. So let's find out what's happening and we'll talk about the first line, which is this. The bride's bouquet arced through the air, targeting me like a deployed missile. So, as you can guess, someone is trying to dodge catching the bouquet, and that would be our adorable heroine, Kate. So, as I said, she's 40 and she's inherited the cafe from her grandmother. When this is the cafe where this wedding reception is being held, and the bridezilla has run late, and Kate's pretty stressed at the beginning of this book for a whole bunch of reasons. So, what's actually happening is that she's got this Saturday afternoon function, and then her 13-year-old niece, Haley, is at the library because Haley adores the library. And Kate was meant to pick her up a while ago, and time's ticking away. So off she runs to the library, and she leaves a lovely voice message for the librarian, who's an acquaintance of hers who she knows reasonably well because Haley lives at the library. And so, in terms of what's happening with Haley, so she's 13. Her mother was Kate's sister, and her parents passed away when she was 2 from from a sailing accident, not a diving accident. Don't know why I'm thinking that, from a sailing accident. And what happened was Kate ended up taking custody of her niece, and at the same time, her ex-fiance dumped her. So he was her boyfriend from when she was at high school, which is something Kate's never got over. So anyway, so that's where we are at the start of the book. And so we end up at the library, and that's where our meet cute happens. And this is where we meet Micah, who's the librarian. Now, he's also Kate's first crush, so before she met the ex-fiance, and from the 7th grade. And he gets this voicemail message that Kate leaves for the librarian, and Kate is absolutely mortified because what she said in that has been a tad embarrassing, to say the least. And so Micah's also 40 and went to school with Kate. He left New Orleans after high school and went to Colorado. And the story is in first person, single point of view. So we only actually hear about the story from Kate. So as the story progresses, we learn more about Micah. So we learn that his father is unwell and is getting older. So he's returned to New Orleans to help care for him with his sister. And as the story progresses, we also learn that Micah was married while he was in Colorado. And we find out why that didn't last as well as we go through the story. So, Micah is adorable. He's a really lovely guy. He wears these quirky Hawaiian shirts to work, and the kids just love these shirts. And so, Kate's kind of a bit taken aback when she sees him because he is a bit different to what she remembers. And of course, it's a romance. So, that zing of attraction is there from the get-go. And Kate has her own quirks, and she has what she calls the crease, which is the line or maybe two lines between her eyebrows. And so when she's stressed, she rubs the crease quite hard. It's her tell for when she's stressed. And we see that quite a bit in the story because there are quite a few problems going on. So the story's open during Mardi Gras season, and I just love that. I just love seeing the cultural backdrop and the way Mardi Gras comes across to someone who's a local, which is different to if you were to go there and be a tourist. And the cafe is located, I think it's on, or if it's not on, it's very close to St. Charles Avenue in the Garden District of New Orleans. So the parade, you can actually see the parade from Kate's Cafe or the upstairs section of the cafe, which is where she lives with Haley. So this story has a lot of problems. We have forced proximity going on where Kate can't avoid Micah. And he does ask her if she can host in her courtyard at the cafe some library functions, which ends up being quite interesting the way that pans out. I'm not going to say any more because I'm not giving away spoilers. And Kate also has the emotional baggage. She's had the difficult relationship with her ex-fiance and the way he treated her, and that's unresolved at the start of the story. And she also has a very complicated relationship with her parents, and she sees them on a Saturday night once a month with Haley for dinner. And it did remind me a bit of Gilmore Girls when I was reading some of those sections. So that might clue you into the fact that there's a few problems going on. And she's also parenting a 13-year-old, and she's still grieving her sister who she adored, and they were really, really close. And losing her sister was had a massive impact on Kate's life, but it also brought Haley into her life, which has been a blessing as well. So she's dealing with Haley, who is bratty at times, and she really wants a puppy, and she's doing everything possible to make it crystal clear to Kate that she's desperate to have a puppy. And that's quite interesting the way all that pans out as well. And Micah, of course, has his own problems, and we learn things about him as the story progresses as well. And his problems also add some complications to their really adorable romance that I absolutely loved. So, my favorite book quote from the story is this one: "You don't need an apology from someone to forgive them." And there is so much truth in that. And it's also got a biblical foundation and ties into the faith elements in the story, which I would describe as being relevant faith elements because they're there. But for most of the story, they're sort of simmering below the surface. So they're not necessarily overt, but they're definitely an integral part of the story. And if you pulled them out, the story wouldn't be the same if you pulled out those faith themes that are in there. And a lot of what Kate and Micah, to an extent as well, are going through is learning to let go of the past and learning to stop holding grudges, to understand what it really means to forgive someone. So what does that actually look like? And how can you forgive someone who is completely unrepentant and isn't prepared to come to the table to talk to you? And how do you actually move on from those types of relationships? And if you can't avoid people like that, how do you navigate family relationships with people that are difficult? So a lot of the story was focused around that. And I really appreciated the way that Rebekah handled that. And I think she did a really good job with the faith elements in the story. And the other thing we've got going on is the plan. So Kate and her sister inherited the cafe from their beloved grandmother. And that was a bone of contention because with her parents and her grandmother, there were issues there. So there were problems that go with that. And Kate and her sister had this plan for what they envisaged they were going to do with the cafe in terms of the business and things like that. And Kate really wants to stick to this plan and do the things that she thinks would make her sister proud. And a lot of that relates to timing. So one of the things that is really explored in the story is looking at Kate's timing versus God's timing and whether they come into alignment. And I really loved how that played out as well. So there were so many things that I loved about this story. I just love Kate and Micah. They were really genuine, relatable, down-to-earth characters. And It was just so fun being in Kate's head and experiencing life through her eyes because she's at heart a very optimistic person and she also has a lovely sense of humor. And there were some really funny moments in this story as well, particularly related to animals and birds. So we have some really quirky side characters as well. And we got to see Julia, which was fabulous. And that's not a spoiler for the first book. You could read these books in any order, although I would recommend reading Julia Monroe Begins Again first before you read this one, so that it makes sense to read in order if you have the ability to do that. And I absolutely adored the ending. There was a lot of stuff happening in the book beneath the surface. And often when you read single point of view, that's often happening because you're not seeing what's going on in Micah's head. It's all through Kate's point of view. And I absolutely loved how all the different things in the story tied together at the ending. And it was a romantic ending. It was just so satisfying. And it was just really, really good. I just loved it. And I also learned, because I did some research and had a look at Google, because there were lots of real life places here. So you could go onto Google Maps and put in some names. You'd actually find what the characters are doing and geographically see what was going on because the setting in New Orleans was just delightful and just came to life so well in the story. And I learned that crawfish is actually what we in Australia would call yabbies. And they're a Australian native species that lives in fresh water, and we don't tend to eat them. Indigenous people originally did, and that's because they're endangered in a lot of places. But I grew up not far from a freshwater dam, and I remember catching yabbies when I was at primary school, which is elementary school age. So it was fun to join the dots and work out. I actually do know what crawfish is or what our Aussie equivalent is. So, in terms of the impact on me for this book, it was had some really poignant moments and some very serious moments in the book. And it did make me think, and I really appreciated that as we watch Kate work through a whole lot of problems and issues that she needed to go through. There were also many laugh out loud moments, and particularly involving birds and animals. It was a very fun read from that point of view, and I was laughing at different times. And there was only one thing that probably threw me a bit, and this is a Narelle issue. I'm sure it's not something anybody else noticed, but at the 28% mark, there was a section, it's less than 10%, where there were characters that had upset stomachs and were puking. And because I was so involved in the book and so in Kate's head, I really had to stop reading when I was about to cook dinner because I just couldn't be cooking and reading at the same time. But that was only because I was so involved in the story. And Rebekah Millet wrote the story so well that she got me so engrossed in being in Julia's head. So I did put the book aside and I picked it up mid-afternoon between lunch and dinner because I had an empty stomach and I wasn't eating, and I got through that part of the book very quickly, and then I very quickly read to the end within 24 hours from there. So that was my only hiccup, and it's very, very minor, and it probably would not bother most people. It's probably only me that it bothers. That's because that's my unique reading experience. But anyway, so in summary, I would recommend Kate Landry Has a Plan to readers who are interested in a book set in New Orleans that has so much culture, has the food, it is really authentic to the setting and highlights what Mardi Gras actually is in New Orleans. And Mardi Gras in New Orleans is very different to what I'd associate Mardi Gras being in Sydney, Australia, for example. So I loved learning those cultural things as well. I'd recommend it for readers who like midlife romances. So if you like characters that are 40 and heading into that midlife stage and have had previous relationships and are navigating children and things like that, then this is definitely one to read. If you like books that are second chances and have childhood sweetheart heart elements, then you'll like this one. If you like family drama, and particularly family drama that doesn't gloss over the fact that there are problems, but actually looks at healthy boundaries and trying to navigate relationships in a healthy way, then you'll like this one. If you like foodie books, particularly Southern food, then you will like Kate Landry Has a Plan. And the story has relevant faith elements that adds a lot of depth and story layers and the forgiveness themes. And I really love that in the book. Thank you for joining me today. Does Kate Landry Has a Plan sound like a book that you'd like to read? Or have you already read it? Or have you read the first book in the series, which is Julia Monroe Begins Again? What did you think? You can let me know. If you're listening on the podcast, you can send a text to me via the link in the show notes. If you're watching on YouTube, you can like the episode and leave a comment at YouTube. And thank you to everyone that does leave comments. It's so much fun to read your comments and to hear what you think about the episodes and the books. If you can also email me via my website, you can go to the contact form at narelleatkins.com. Please subscribe. If you've enjoyed listening to this episode, if you hit the subscribe button at your favorite podcasting app or at YouTube, then you're not going to miss an episode, which drops weekly. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend who you think would like Rebekah Millet's books or likes reading contemporary Christian romance. All the links that I've mentioned are in the show notes. Thanks for tuning in and see you next time.